Welcome to Trekosophy, the Star Trek philosophy podcast. This is episode number 18, recorded November 1st, 2012. And tonight, we got a special treat for you. We've actually lifted up from their original time frames 3 people that you all know and love. First off, we have the gruffest shapeshifter this side of the wormhole, s01e18.
What kind of introduction is that?
And we also have the man who had to cheat his way into this podcast, Captain Kirk.
Call me Jim.
And the man who Captain Kirk looked up to as a child, we have Captain Archer.
Call me Mr. Archer.
Very well. And tonight we're going to be discussing, well, basically all of your viewpoints. The Doctor will take you back to your original times as soon as we're over. But for now, we need you to kind of say a few words to your adored fans, or actually the fans of the people who have portrayed you on your respective shows. And this being a philosophy-minded podcast, we're going to have to kind of bend things towards the philosophical side. First of all, I'd like to ask, well, let's start with Captain Archer. You were the first in line. What did you think about your show?
The portrayal of me, I thought it was spot on, accurate.
Based on the historical records, I think that Captain Archer's portrayal may have been a bit romanticized.
In what way?
Have you watched the show?
I've skimmed the show.
I don't know if it'd be very productive to argue this. Just never mind.
Fair enough.
So you don't think, Mr. Archer, that your portrayal wasn't, a little too over the top, maybe a little too much action oriented, or
action oriented?
Yeah, I've seen you.
It was the antebellum with the Romulan War. It was the founding of the Federation. We were defending against Borg, Xindi, you name it. No, I don't think they
spot on, huh?
I don't think they overdid anything.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, how about you, Captain Kirk? Jim. What did you think?
Well, I'm glad they got someone good-looking to play me. Although, I would like to say that I was a little bit better fighter than they showed in the show. I didn't have to lose my shirt that often.
Really?
Huh.
You don't believe that, do you, Odo?
No comment.
Okay.
Well, I think your show lacked the virtue of having your first officer lose their shirt very often.
But Vulcans, Vulcans are cold-blooded, as McCoy would say, so he needed the extra warmth.
I disagree.
Well, if my first officer looked like T'Pol, I'd probably disagree too.
Spock is a very interesting character because he brings at least a non-human perspective to things.
Could you elaborate on that a little, Odo?
Well, my own experience was often one of being somewhat of an outsider, and I think I have that in common with Spock. In fact, when I was portrayed on DS9 by that Renee,
I believe it's Aubergenois.
I have as much trouble with that guy's name as I have with one of your humanoid noses. I can't get it right.
That's quite all right. Go ahead.
Well, anyway, both in real life and as how I was portrayed on your television series, I was somewhat of an outsider, and I've been described as the Spock character, so I suppose I have some certain things in common with Spock. One is having an austere outlook on things.
Austere?
Right, and Spock the perpetual outsider. An outsider on Vulcan and an outsider on Earth.
And I'm the same way. I'm an outsider on DS9 and an outsider among my own people.
Mr. Archer, do you believe that maybe T'Pol also felt the same way? She was sort of an outsider on your ship, was she not?
You bet your rear end. I don't know. I never talk. I don't want to be that close with my crew.
What were you getting ready to say there, Mr. Jim?
I was going to say that Spock may have been an outsider on Vulcan, and he may have been an alien on Earth, but when he was on the Enterprise, he was with his family, and he was human, and he made us more Vulcan. We complemented each other. We worked together to make something more than just what one man can be. Spock and McCoy fought all the time, but they fought the way brothers fight. And in the end, McCoy and Spock would save each other in a heartbeat, without hesitation, without thinking. And Spock saved us all so many times. Logic be damned.
That's true. That's true.
I think at least the way I was portrayed on DS9 had something like that going on with Quark. Though in real life, Quark was a liar and a thief, and not to be trusted. But it is strange how each of the shows focused on a period in Federation history, and it is Federation history, not galactic history, which focuses around perhaps 7 or 8 people who form a kind of community, which often wasn't the normal experience. I noticed that even the makeup of our group here is disproportionately Federation and disproportionately Earth. I mean, where's the Klingon outlook? Where's the Romulan outlook? Where's even the Bajoran or Cardassian outlook? I mean, I'm the only non-human on this panel.
That's true, but you have to understand the shows you all watched and that you were a part of in your lives, they were actually geared towards a human audience. And so in order to allow the audience to relate to the characters better, they had to show it from a more Federation point of view. Surely you can understand that, Odo.
I suppose it's something that wouldn't occur to me as a shapeshifter, because if I want to understand something, I change into it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, if I could say something from the feminist perspective, and I believe I'm entitled to, because between Kirk and myself, the women on my ship were allowed to wear pants. I think there's a wonderful contribution they have in that they say if you're divorced from a certain perspective, that diminishes your authority to speak about that perspective. And oftentimes, though I don't agree with it entirely, I think there's a kernel of truth that will say, well, that's a women's issue that men really can't speak to. Whether or not that's true, I mean, I don't know. But I can say from a Christian perspective, if you see in the church, people will try to say things about Christians that simply aren't true. Oh, the reason why they think X is because they hate science. The reason why so-and-so is pro-life is because they hate women. So when you try to say things that aren't really from your perspective, you often get it wrong and you often look quite foolish. So we're looking at things from a human perspective. Well, how do you discuss Klingons without that particular perspective? It's a bit crippled.
I have to admit, humans do seem to sort of be the shapeshifters of the humanoids, because they sort of see around all different perspectives of the other races in ways that the other races don't see each other. At least that's been my impression from watching the shows, rather than from living them.
That's true. That's true. In fact, I do recall even Captain Picard saying something very similar to Q about how the human race is continually evolving and changing, that they will eventually become something like the Q continuum.
Yes. This Q character, I don't understand what drives him.
I'm not entirely sure either.
I think fear of boredom.
Surely there are a lot more interesting things to do than hang around DS9 and slug Commander Sisko.
When I was captain of the Enterprise, we encountered many, many godlike aliens.
And you
Trelane,
whooped them all.
well, we made it out alive. One of my first missions was where we lost Gary Mitchell, a very good friend of mine who did become that godlike figure for human evolution. But sometimes it was a question of boredom, but I think in many ways it was just curiosity. They were exploring as we were, or they were holding on to something they had already found. Apollo was a human god who was out there in space, and he wanted to stay where he was with the humans. But Trelane was just a very annoying practical joker.
Well, with Q, I mean, wanting to spend his time with people, how shall I say it, on the lower end of the evolutionary spectrum, if you'll permit me that language. I'm fond of playing with my dog. My dog's not a sophisticated person, but I still enjoy the interaction and doing simplistic things for his amusement, and in that amuses me.
Kind of like my experience, shape-shifting into a rock.
Exactly.
Interesting way of putting it. Well, shifting gears just a little bit, how about I get your opinions, your philosophical outlook on life, if you will? Let's start with Odo this time. What do you think?
Well, I think it should be obvious for anyone who's seen the show.
Yes, I'm
the
sure you're
S9
probably very much into justice. Is that correct?
Yes, justice is the defining principle of my life and my whole outlook. And even though my people seem to be more focused on order and order for the sake of order, I believe in order for the sake of justice. It's what motivates my every decision. Well, the decisions I'm proud of, anyway. The ones I don't regret. At all.
Understand. And I'm guessing, Captain Kirk, or Jim, I'm guessing you probably, from what I've seen of your exploits, you probably don't hold justice necessarily to be the highest regard, do you?
Not justice for the sake of justice. There are times when, to do the right thing, you need to break the rules. When I was out exploring everything in the universe, the fundamental mission of the Enterprise was to explore strange new worlds and seek out new life and new civilizations. And this was not to reinforce what we believed, but this was to see something new. And there was so much out there that challenged even the most fundamental philosophies and made you realize that whatever you think you know, you're not prepared for every situation if you limit yourself only to the choices you're given or the choices you start with. The one thing I learned was there are always other options, and there's always another answer out there over the horizon.
Well, Captain Kirk, fascinating as your exploits as an explorer are, I would be quick to clarify that I definitely do not believe in rules for the sake of rules. In fact, I had many instances in my career as a Bajoran security officer when rules got in the way. And it's really not about rules. Justice is not about rules. It's about having a personal code of values that you do not compromise on and do not violate, no matter what. And from what I've seen of the original series of Star Trek, in which you were portrayed by Mr. Shatner, you seem to have one of those, and you're in slim company, I'm sorry to say.
I have a personal code, yes, but only for as long as it's right. I've gotten in trouble a few times for breaking the rules. I might be the most decorated rogue in Federation history, along with being one of their better captains.
The man was a menace.
Well, you had it easy when you were there. There weren't any rules. You didn't even have a prime directive to deal with.
He's got a point there.
That's quite correct.
The way the shows were portrayed, it almost seemed like Archer had more rules than Kirk, even though not on the books. In the scripts.
Well,
I mean, so much of the story had been established in the other series, and they had to they tried not to contradict anything that came before. Of course, in history, it could be completely different. You never know how much of historical records are accurate.
well,
From my end of history.
I had a lot of ethical constraints. But at the same time, that has to be coupled with the idea that it was a frontier time, exploration. And that was going to cause a tension with some of the ethical constraints. And Enterprise was about the exploration of that tension, I think, just as much as it was about anything else.
Yes, and I believe you also had the Vulcans were holding you back quite a bit too, weren't they?
Well, perhaps, but rather than being a constraint, that might have been a bit of a motivating force, propelling me to act, because they had withheld just enough information to slow down the progress of my father and his engine, and so forth. That actually may have motivated me to go further than I would have otherwise. That, what's the word? Resentment.
Rather like myself and Dr. Mora, he had to sort of force me into assuming a recognizable shape to humanoids. Took me a long time to figure him out.
Right, but that near resentment you had of Dr. Mora, it was, is cumbersome the right word I'm looking for? It was a burden at the time, but it actually moved you forward.
I suppose so. It took me many years to admit that. It was only when we found the newly formed changeling that I first began to realize and look at things more from Dr. Mora's perspective.
Well, it's
I
similar
hadn't been exactly fair to him.
People without children are always so critical of people who have children. When you have them of your own, your perspective shifts.
I still don't think that the metaphor of a newly formed changeling being like a humanoid infant is quite accurate, but I think the sentiment is understandable.
Excellent.
Okay, then. Well, I'll go along with that.
Maybe I should say something about my philosophy.
Please do.
To put it neatly, I would say it's exploration guided by skepticism. But it's not skepticism as in the Skeptic magazine, Michael Shermer sort of skepticism. It's a G.K. Chesterton sort of skepticism. And he said he read as little of Christian apologetics as possible. Instead, in order to be more faithful, he read the attackers on Christianity, because skeptics taught him to not only be skeptical and suspicious, but to be suspicious of skepticism as well, and to even be skeptical about scientific materialism. So I'm guided here by not only this scientific materialism and doubt and skepticism, I'm also suspicious of those things themselves. I mean, when the scientific community says time travel is impossible, well, I'm going to start to doubt the people who are professional doubters. My exploration is molded by this, but it's also about me sort of breaking free from that worldview.
It's kind of like my habit of reading crime novels, try to understand criminal psychology. I'm trying to catch criminals. I'm combating crime, but to understand that, I have to get inside the mind of a criminal, understand how they think.
Right. Oh, yeah, I suppose, yeah, you could draw the parallel, couldn't you? It's almost, it's really like Kirk. It's all about exploration. It's as if I'm just a cheap ripoff of Kirk, a vain attempt at recreating him.
I will say that while in some cases it may seem that way, you built a starship with your own hands. You blazed a trail. Your little ship was not as fast, not as powerful, and it didn't go as far, but I once had to fight a Gorn and make my own cannon from rocks lying around on the surface. So part of why I did that was thinking that you started with nothing. You were from a pre-warp society, and you did all of that.
Yeah, but we still got slapped around with a Gorn. No bare hands, and we still couldn't beat him that well.
As I said, I am a better fighter than I may have been portrayed, so
Well, that's true.
we've learned a few things. And by the time I came along, the Klingons were not a potential ally or even an unknown. We knew they were violent, so I had a little more combat experience.
Wasn't I the one who made them violent, though? That's got to count for something.
You can't really make a Klingon do anything or be anything. They are Klingon,
I thought you were talking about the Gorn.
The Gorn?
Can't tell you humanoids apart sometimes.
They were talking about the Gorn at first, but then they shifted gears a little.
Yeah, we shifted.
It's a captain thing.
Huh.
Captain's prerogative.
Okay, well, speaking
We'll
of
get back
shifting
on
gears,
track on Tuesday. Yeah.
Jim, since this is Trekosophy, after all, why don't you tell us a little bit about if you have a certain, we all know that you looked up to Captain Archer as a child. You wanted to search the galaxy just like he did, explore. But did you happen to have any sort of philosophical heroes as a child? Not necessarily heroes so much, but maybe just a philosopher that you admired, that you sort of adapted his traits, his outlooks?
I think if I were to have to pick a philosopher, I'd probably pick one that wasn't a philosopher that most people would think of as a philosopher. And I'm going to say that Mark Twain would have made a great starship captain. I think Mark Twain's outlook on life, here was a man who fought in the war but never fired a shot. Here was a man who went out and did amazing things. He was an explorer in his own right, not just of the world around him, but of his own humanity. He was a riverboat captain. He panned for gold. He was a newspaper editor. He did whatever he wanted to do to push the limits of what society would think about. And when I think of inspirational figures from history, yes, Captain Archer is up there being the first starship captain, but Mark Twain, in his own way, was a philosopher whose outlook I try to emulate.
I'll never forget a quote from Mark Twain that I think is very applicable to Kirk. Unfortunately, I won't get the quote verbatim. But he said, "To abstain from something gives you a joy. There is a certain joy in not participating in something. And the greater the thing is that you're abstaining from, the greater the abstinence is, which would make abstinence the greatest thing." And so Twain said he would therefore abstain from abstinence.
Yes.
I rather like, wasn't it Twain who said, "The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated"?
Yeah.
That one stands out. I hope that was relevant.
Well, I have cheated death a few times in my day.
It's interesting that you look up to Twain, who fought in wars but didn't fire a single shot. You fired quite a few shots yourself, Jim.
Well, it isn't the principle of violence itself. I mean, the Federation starships are equipped with very impressive weapons, although their primary mission is exploration.
Oh, I don't just mean the starship weapons. I mean your own fists.
Well, diplomacy is a good thing, but for some people, the diplomatic solution should not be the only solution you have. And I think that what makes Twain's not firing a shot similar to me being willing to fight when I need to fight is that what Twain did goes against the standard perception that people have of the war. Brother against brother, and yet he never fired a shot. He just walked off into the woods, his unit stood around, and then the war was over. And so he did the unexpected. And it's that part of it that impresses me, because even when you're fighting, sometimes, yeah, you have to fight, but you can't win if you are predictable.
So you're saying yours was more in self-defense, probably.
Yes, I fought often, but there were times when I didn't fight. Not every problem can be solved with violence, but violence shouldn't be ignored either. All of your options need to be considered, even options you might not think are options.
Fair enough. How about you, Odo? Having studied humanity for some time now, do you have any particular philosophers that you seem to admire?
Yes, well, seeing as how I was destined to appear on a program dedicated to Earth philosophy, I decided I had better read at least one Earth philosopher, or at least read about him. I normally don't have time for that kind of thing. But the Earth philosopher that has impressed me the most was Immanuel Kant.
Really?
I believe he was from Earth's 18th century.
I'm not entirely familiar, but that sounds about right.
Anyway, Kant's ethics stress this whole idea of duty, that the only thing that makes an action moral or immoral is whether it's from a good motive. If the motive is right, then the action is right. But if the motive's wrong, then the action's wrong. I think that's why I always suspected Quark, because I knew that even when he's doing the right thing, it's from the wrong motive.
Yeah.
Even if, you would never do anything against the law, anything that was wrong, even though the motive for it was right.
Well, you have to be very careful about what you mean by law. I would never do anything that is unjust. And I think if it's unjust, then the motive for it's got to be wrong on some level. But I would disregard the arbitrary rules of the Cardassians or the Bajorans or the Federation or whichever other galactic power or planetary power controls the station this week in order to pursue justice. Because justice is justice. It's not made up arbitrarily by any one of these political powers. And I think that's one thing that Kant understood, which I can respect. Also, none of this utilitarian, consequentialist, means to an end junk.
Yeah, I had a feeling you probably wouldn't care too much for utilitarianism.
The other thing about Kant that I find interesting, well, actually, I don't find it interesting. I find it astronomically boring, if you could pardon the pun, because of all the our being in a program which, from your perspective, is about space. Kant's epistemology is phenomenally boring, But he makes one distinction that's very interesting. He says that we can never know things in themselves. We can only know the appearances of things. And I think that's very true for solids. None of you are able to know things in themselves. All you know, other than about yourselves, is the appearances of things. But that doesn't hold for me as a shapeshifter, as a changeling. Because as a changeling, to become a thing is to understand its essence. So as I'm able to assume the forms of different objects, I am able to achieve the kind of knowledge Kant said was impossible. So he wasn't quite correct on that.
Well,
But the
Kant was
distinction is
human,
useful.
after all.
Yes, the distinction he makes is useful, even though I don't think he reaches quite the right conclusion on that because of my different changeling perspective.
Well, I think a lot of his writings are based on the idea that we perceive a table through our human faculties, and we don't have the capacity to divorce ourselves from those human faculties. So in that sense, Kant would have been bang on. I mean, there's nothing Odo.
But as a changeling, I am able to divorce myself from
that's the whole
humanoid perspectives.
And so Kant wasn't speaking to you. I mean, you're not human.
Yes, but it gives me an insight into how humanoids think.
Well, that would make you the greatest metaphysician of all time, too, now, wouldn't it?
That may very well be true, though I expect some of these omnipotent beings like that Q probably would know more about this than I would, being omnipotent.
Oh, he could be a rock, couldn't he?
Yes, I mean, not only could he be a rock, but he didn't just know the essence of a rock, he could actually make a rock. Of course, I know that humanoids are very prone to believe in gods, and that's a tendency I don't share because, well, I mean, I'm too busy trying to fix the mess that's down here than to worry about what's up there. But I begin to see somewhat of why humanoids are focused on gods, because gods can see things in themselves which humanoids can't.
Right. I think I follow that. I'm not sure I agree with your ethics. I mean, you are talking to the guy who went into the expanse and had to abide by not only a different set of physical laws, but a different set of ethical laws as well.
Huh. Try that on the station. I'll lock you in one of my cells.
Well, if your station has some spare parts that my ship needs, you might be out of luck. I mean, justice is justice. That's true, but what if justice being justice is bringing about more harm than there is good? I mean, you're talking about the motivation behind an action. Well, what if somebody's good intentioned but brings about just an unholy mess? I mean, a government policy that's set to make everybody happy and turn us all into Care Bears floating in the sky. But in reality, it just
I'm sorry, I'm not following your cultural reference. A Care Bear.
A Care Bear. It's in the Earth database.
I'll have to look it up.
Have to look it up sometime. We'll do a hollow recreation.
Quark's wanting to know about it.
Well, he'd probably make a Care Bear love slave if he got his hands on it, so we'll not let Quark anywhere near it.
Probably wise.
Ooh, I mean, you say justice is justice, but what about when justice might be harming people?
In what way?
Well, for example, when I went to the Expanse, and I had to steal the components from the ship, I did my best to offer them a fair trade. More than fair trade. They wouldn't accept it. And so I took the components without their authorization from their ship to add to my ship so I can complete my mission and save Earth. Justice wouldn't have permitted that. There was an injustice done to them. But had that not been done, Earth would have been destroyed.
Well, you see, this is where having read Kant and understanding some of his ethics actually comes into a practical application, because before I read Kant, while I was an officer on DS9, I simply would have asked whether you were in the jurisdiction of any government, and if you were, then basically it would have been social contract theory, or what you call social contract theory on Earth. But Kantian ethics would ask, given that you are in the same position, I mean, given that anyone else is ever in the same position, would it have been all right for them to do it?
Well, that's true, but Kant is also an absolutist when it comes to ethics. I mean, he says, I don't want to be lied to, and therefore no lies whatsoever. Under no circumstance can you lie. But the whole point about Kant saying ethics is useless if it's relative, it's only useful if it's absolute. He's going to say we don't get to go around granting exceptions for people.
That's
true. That's the whole point. I can't say, well, you know what, here's an ethical standard, but I'm exempt for, contextual reasons X, Y, and Z.
That's true. I wouldn't be able to work any of my intelligence sources if I fully accepted Kant's ethics.
Also true. Theft is right at the top of the list. I mean, no lying, no suicide, no theft. And that's an absolute. Saying, Archer, myself, I'm not in this special position. I mean, the universe hasn't granted me some sort of special exemption from the ethical standard. But that being said, if I followed Kant, Earth would have been destroyed.
Well, I think I remember reading somewhere that different deontologists since Kant have modified his ethics a great deal and boiled it down basically to simply asking the question, given identical circumstances, identical result? And I'm not sure, but I suspect that if Captain Kirk here, say, were in the same position as you were and he was stealing someone's parts, that you'd probably approve of his action.
Well, actually, that does bring us to another topic I wanted to mention here. Jim, you might actually have a bit of a disagreement with Odo. There was a certain incident that occurred where you disobeyed a superior officer, you stole the Enterprise, you later destroyed the Enterprise. Lots of things, and you even lost your own son just to get Spock back amongst your crew. And now, granted, later you were exonerated of almost all of those charges, but how do you explain all that? Have you lost? Oh, there you go.
No, I'm here. It's a very good question. How do I justify everything I did? My son would have died no matter what I did. Those Klingons were already there, and they went after him and the science ship that was checking out the Genesis planet. So I don't like to think I sacrificed my son. I like to think I was there to avenge him. But when Khan damaged the Enterprise and we were on the verge of death, by most philosophical standards, it would have been acceptable to say that we were beaten and we would have died. But Spock, even as logical as he is, realized that sometimes you have to ignore the odds, ignore the numbers. And Spock did the impossible. He saved the ship. He saved all of us one last time. And my career was nearly over anyway. I was an admiral at that point, which means I'm one step away from a desk. The Enterprise, in the condition she was in, was just going to be scrapped anyway. They already had a new state-of-the-art starship to replace her. So I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. When it came down to it, what makes us human isn't just our moral codes or our rules, because rules can change and rules can be broken. What makes us human, what makes us, even if we're alien, what makes us worth saving means that sometimes even justice doesn't matter. It's about doing what needs to be done. And frankly, the fact that I could do all of those things indicated that Starfleet put a little too much stock in the rules and not enough stock in their people.
Wait a minute.
You give me the right crew, and it doesn't even matter what ship you give us, we'll get the job done. So if we have to break the rules to do that, if we have to set aside some principle of justice, and I believe in the principles of the Federation, except when there needs to be another option. Nothing can ever.
You're telling me that justice doesn't matter, and what matters is getting the job done.
Well, can I add?
What job? For who? I mean, isn't it justice that defines what the job needing to be done is?
I was stuck in a similar situation. And bearing in mind, Romulan ale was not yet illegal at this point, so I might not remember some of the details. But me and a comrade were trying to break the Warp 2 barrier, and the Vulcans recommended that the project get scrapped. They said it was unsafe. But thanks to the ingenuity of Commander Trip Charles Tucker III, we found out what the problem was, and we found out that the project was actually safe, but because of the Vulcan stiffness, their pig-headed, arrogant, unwilling to change, they had set down a legal precedent saying this is the way that it's going to be. And as much as I respect the chain of command, my goodness, I'm a captain, I had to go against it. And the reason why I had to go against it was because I knew the benefits that would come from discarding the principle, the legalistic principle. And we never did get to my favorite philosopher, but he happens to be Augustine. An unjust law is no law at all. What's a law trying to do? Well, it's trying to bring about justice for the land. And a law that's not doing that misses the essence of a law, and so it's not a law. And so I saw their dictate as not even being a dictate. Well, what's the Federation trying to do? What's Starfleet trying to do? Trying to protect people, trying to do X, Y, and Z. Well, if they have a set of commandments that they're laying down, well, then it's not really that much of a Starfleet principle anymore. And so it was just for Kirk to steal the Enterprise.
I think I'd agree with this Augustine character there. I think maybe you Earth people would do better to listen to this guy.
He's not a bad cat.
Well, what else did he say?
Oh, I'm on the spot that way. He said science isn't about dispensing absolute knowledge. He was even a bit suspicious of it at times. He preferred facts that he could gravitate towards with absolute certainty, mathematics. He had a very healthy respect and admiration for skepticism, but also the realization that there are some things that can be known. Augustine was he was a moral relativist, but he saw morality as being relative to God, who is absolute. So he wouldn't make any absolute moral claims, and he usually dissected moral claims that were seen as absolute But he thought they were rooted in something that was absolute. Time, again, something we think of as a constant. He said, no, it's really not. And so he has a way of expanding our mental horizons. He was an explorer. In that sense, he explored as much as he could. So that's the reason I'm so infatuated with him.
Sounds like a mixture.
Sure. I mean, you're going to have people saying theft is wrong. Well, what are the circumstances? Augustine would want to know. So do I.
Well, I suppose you could call some of the things that we did as part of Kira Nerese's resistance cell during the Cardassian occupation. The second Cardassian occupation of Bajor, or at least of the station, as theft and so on. But that was on the basis that an unjust law is no law at all. I mean, Gul Dukat, can you call his edicts law? I mean, during the Cardassian occupation, I was the only law in sight.
Right. Dukat misses the essence of what it means to be a law. When he gives an edict, it's nothing reminiscent of what a law is supposed to do. And so the law-abiding citizen ignores the law. There's a paradox.
Quark keeps interrupting me. He wants to know about Kirk's relationship with the ladies.
A gentleman never tells. So, which one do you want to know about first? No, I don't know if I would say I was a ladies' man, but I had the same qualities that made me the captain I was. The charisma, the intelligence, the wit are positive qualities for many other things. And the women I met appreciated my talents.
Oh, and confidence, too.
Oh, of course. Well, once you're in that center chair, if you have any doubts that you don't belong there, you don't belong there.
My own relationship with Kira Nerys has been, apparently, because of your television program, the subject of much conversation. And I might say that, wonderful of a person as she was, I really think the bond between us started because of our similar outlook. That there's injustice in the world, and it's our destiny to do something about it, try to make things right. And I think that was the theme that ran through both of our lives. And awkward as our first steps toward that kind of relationship were, especially on my part, I think that it deepened beyond that. But that was how it started. And I think that it's so strange for me to offer an opinion on humanoid relationships. But I think that you ought to find someone who embodies your values. And I think that would be the deepest kind of relationship you can find, is a person who embodies your values.
I agree with that, yes.
And I think, I could be wrong, but I suspect that was what Captain Kirk saw in the mother of his child in his adventure when he re-encountered. We saw portrayed briefly in the adventure in which he re-encountered his arch nemesis, Khan. You think that might have been what you saw in her, and why she actually became the mother of your child?
Well, I think for me, it's not about finding someone like me. I mean, okay, I
Oh, I
may
didn't
have.
say like you. I said someone that shared your outlook.
Yeah, I don't think that it's about shared outlooks. For me, it was about finding something different, something beyond what I was, what I would see. I was, if you'll pardon the euphemism, exploring strange new worlds.
Well, I think that's going to be a given in almost any relationship.
But if you can respect an outlook that is different from your own, then you learn more than discovering an outlook that is your own. Carol and I had a wonderful thing, and from that we had a son, but we were on different paths. We had different outlooks. She went her way, I went mine, which is why I didn't even know of my son for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that was a major difference in my relationship with Kira versus my relationship with the shapeshifter, which represented herself as female. Of course, the whole idea of femininity and masculinity make no sense in the context of being a changeling, except as these are chosen rather than naturally formed. But the relationship with who you know as the female shapeshifter was one which I found an outlook which was not very different from mine at all, because we have the shared experience of being a shapeshifter. In fact, she came close to knowing more about me than I did about myself. But Kira, on the other hand, was automatically an adventure because she's a humanoid and I'm a shapeshifter. I'm changeling. I mean, we had a different perspective built in that fell in our laps. I meant a similar perspective on ethics and our ultimate goals in life, rather than on the sort of values we would try to instill in children if we had them. Though it wouldn't couldn't as being different species, but if we were to adopt or what have you. Of course, that relationship could not go on forever because I had responsibilities, and so did she. But who knows? We may pick it up again one day, or could be too late at that point. I don't know.
Well, on that romantic note, we probably should bring this to a bit of a close here. Well, do any of you have any final philosophical thoughts to bring to the table?
I think the essence of this thing we call Star Trek is the spirit of exploration. And we see it in Archer's era, in Kirk's era. It's one of the admirable traits of my own people, even though our form of exploration is very different from the humanoid forms of it. But it's something that drives every era. Even DS9, which stayed in one place, was still exploring that one place, and eventually the Gamma Quadrant. So it's this spirit of exploration that unites everything that you have come to call Star Trek.
I definitely agree with that. What about you two, Jim and Archer?
I hate to have to insist on the Mr. Archer, but it was already mentioned.
My apologies, Mr. Archer.
Mr. Archer, that's better.
I think if it comes to exploration being the key to what Star Trek is and what the Federation was and what we were, then at the core of that exploration is the realization that everything we know is wrong. And when you get out there and you see something never seen before, you have to be willing to let go of the rules, of your beliefs, of whatever it is you face, while still trying to hold on to yourself and what it is that made you want to follow these rules, follow this philosophy in the first place. Because with everything I did, with everything Archer did, with everything that Odo's people have done, we still haven't seen even the tiniest portion of what's really out there.
Well, I would mirror that. I mean, again, I'm just a cheap knockoff. But the whole point of Enterprise is to say, look, you have value X. Well, maybe that's not going to work in all situations. I mean, Archer was a skeptic who wound up carrying the Katra of Sirach. You know, he has to go beyond some of his mental horizons, and he has to grow mentally, spiritually, in order to maintain the attitude of exploration. He has to be willing to adopt new facts into his outlook on life. And that is a value I definitely have admiration for.
Alrighty then. Well, unless there are anything else you would like to bring up, I think we can call this one a podcast then. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'll have the doctor return you to your native times, and we'll hope maybe we'll see you again in the future or the past.
Have fun.
Thank you. Kirk out.
Well, thank you for listening. Be sure to check out our website, Trekosophy.com. Find us on Facebook and Twitter. Send us an email, trekosophy@gmail.com. And please check us out on iTunes. Leave us a review. Give us some stars if you feel like it. And
leave us a good review.
And please send us some topics and questions you'd like us to ponder over here on the show. So join us next week, and I'd like to thank Brandon Kirby, Bill Allen, and Ben McLean. See you next time.
And Doctor Who for delivering all the people.
Yeah.
Get me those forward torpedoes now, mister. I don't want to hear any panic.
Humdingers. Is that the right word?
You don't give monkeys guns. I don't care what the situation is. That's always a bad idea.
I'm just here to philosophize. Any sort of backstory you want to give, knock yourselves out.
Someday I plan on giving up smoking. Or someday I plan on taking over the world.
This is Brandon Kirby saying hello to all the ladies out there in Radio Land.
You know, it's like put a whole new meaning on the phrase guerrilla warfare.
Let's go to the magic wheel of Google Drive and give it a spin.
Join us next week when our special guest is Marcel Marceau.
You know, I could just go with no, Mike.
That would be an interesting podcast. But every now and then I might say, "You are out of order," and let you freeze or something.
Ricardo Montalban's not around to save us anymore.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave.